Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. Today I will be covering the All Ships Q&A Star Citizen Live from a short while back. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Thank you guys so much for the support, it is truly appreciated. And if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. Now there is a lot to go through, so as usual, grab yourself a drink and some snacks if necessary, and let's get to it. About a month ago, there was an All Ships Q&A Star Citizen Live with John, Crew and Richard answering all of our questions surrounding ships. Now at the time of releasing, I was having a baby, so I missed covering this in Star Citizen Sunday, but after finally watching it, I would really like to cover it today, as there was some great information to be shared. So many of you might have already seen this, but hopefully I can shed a little bit more light into what was said, or maybe elaborate a little further. But with that said, the first question was, what is the current state of physicalized armor, damage, and components? Now for the physicalized damage, the physics teams are still working on it, and have had a few more test cases which revealed a few more issues, and they are now currently looking at starting with resolving smaller scale problems rather than going all in right now by using smaller environmental assets rather than a full ship, as it does make it easier to then scale up. The visual effects teams are heavily testing and running simulations for the breakability effect, like crumpling and bending of metals to create a more realistic effect. The physical armor is kind of a byproduct of physical damage, so it will come alongside the damage system, but physical components are independent to the physicalized damage, as they are individual components, and in the very near future, they say, they are looking to start going through some of the ships and placing those physical components into the ships, as many of the newer ships have their actual component housing set up and ready to go. Of course, they will be going back through the older ships and updating them to accommodate these components, which is part of the gold standard pass that we are seeing with a few ships right now. This is a lot of work, they say, but they are putting a lot more focus on going back through the older ships and ensuring that all the ships have the locations for the components, the resource network, which is how each component connects to each other, and have this information and data presented to the player, so basically engineering. That is also in the works, as we have been hearing about with the monthly reports. So it is all progressing in many different fronts, and will be more of a slow burn for the next few months, but over the course of the next few patches, ship interiors may change up a little, which is all preparation for this. Now these are a few aspects of Star Citizen that really excite me the most. The depth of interactions and customizations with our ships, our vehicles, our homes, space stations, all requiring components to run properly, capable of taking realistic damage, and then that bringing repair and engineering mechanics into the game at the same time. It is a huge system, which is well underway now, and as mentioned earlier, in the most recent monthly report, we got to see a life support screen, which is kind of an early work in progress of an engineering multifunction display. So still quite a bit of work yet before it's realized, but it's coming along nicely, and it's going to be a joy to watch this expand. Jared did actually mention that we will see a lot more of the resource management stuff in Q3, Q4 this year, and I cannot wait. So as much as we're not going to have full components and systems on board ships for engineering by the end of the year, it'll be certainly paving the foundations for that for hopefully next year. Next question, what is the plan for medium fighters, as they are not very competitive? Now with the most recent rebalance that they did for fighters and weapons, which was a few patches ago now, they are still working out more finer details about what makes a fighter good against another fighter, especially when it comes to size differences and things like the addition of turrets. They have been running tests in the background to figure this all out, and one thing that they are planning to do is reduce the effective combat speeds again to address multiple factors, like the balancing of the ship's maneuverability, which will certainly reveal more of each ship's strengths and weaknesses, the speed at which the turrets can move, the overly fast-paced jousting that happens, making decisions more meaningful in making the right choice and actioning those choices well, but also to make dogfighting more visceral, rather than just chasing pixels or constantly looking for that pip. It was also mentioned that they will create a fast-paced combat mechanic as well, but that is not the focus right now. There is a bit more talk about reducing the combat speeds later on, as it is the next step, but we will come back to that. Next question is, has there been any more work done on the ship and vehicle tractor beams? Now, they say the work done on the multi-tool tractor beam, which is the handheld one, is about 70% copy-paste to the ship tractor beam, but there are some force and mass number twiddling that they need to do. And visual effects also want to get in and give it more of a robust feeling compared to the handheld version. It does almost work out of the box in its use cases and will be far more useful once the cargo refactor is in, plus some UI is needed for the remote view on the turret to help players understand what is going on. Now, towards the end of the year, they will be working on the tech side of things, like the intelligent flight control system, because with tractor beams, it is the sense that someone else will be controlling the vehicle at the same time as the pilot, which they know what they need to do here to make it work, it just needs doing. So I guess it's about resources freeing up and allowing them to make the changes. Next question is, what is going on with the overall ship balance pass that started last year? And they say that they have done as much as they could with the resources that they had at the time, so bringing everything in sync and tuning all the vehicles, items and weapons, which has now set them up in a great place to move forward. They are now working on a couple of features in the background, which are to be the next steps. This will enable them to, as mentioned before, bring those combat speeds down. Once they're down, they will then push forward on making the ships feel more unique into how they're supposed to feel within their bubble, as they put it, meaning each ship's behavior and characteristics will be more apparent and vary from ship to ship, but more as they were kind of advertised as. The whole ship reduction is to make it more skill-based and allow players to try and get an edge on their opponent, utilizing each ship's strengths and weaknesses, weapons and weapon velocities and so on. And this doesn't mean that ships will just be going slower full stop. They will still be able to travel at high speeds. It is just to work out the combat right now. Now, personally, I do really like the sound of this. At first, I was a little apprehensive about constantly slowing down the speed. I do like fast-paced combat, but I can see what they're trying to do. There are so many factors in ship-to-ship combat, and creating this whole dichotomy of the combat environment is going to take a lot of tweaking. But personal preference and ability will certainly come into this, and picking the right ship for the job, or utilizing each ship for its strengths, and then reacting to all the various opponents as well. Combat, when it gets to where CIG are aiming for it to be, will be so involved, and that is what I'm kind of waiting for before I delve into practicing and training. I do feel we are pretty far from that moment of it being exactly how they want to be it, but all of this work and this tweaking and balancing and testing is pushing us closer to that. Next question is, will ship and vehicle stealth get some love? Good question, and they say they have sneakily brought in a couple of changes for a couple of stealth ships already in-game, and they do have a plan for stealth and the entire radar system, which is currently in development right now. But the main focus, as mentioned, is the combat speeds, but also a lot of the changes and benefits of stealth will come when components get their balance pass as well. Next question, what is the advantage of using a multi-crew ship versus taking multiple fighters? And again, it will come down to the speeds. These will factor into it as well. As they slow things down, the speed of the ship versus the speed of the turret's rotation and the turret's strength will matter. Right now, ships with turrets have become more competitive in terms of the current meta, so they are already far more viable than they were before, but also things like running costs of multiple ships versus a single ship will one day factor into it. And with Pyro coming along, travelling long distance with small ships will take much longer or not even be viable if there is nowhere else to refuel. So taking a bigger ship with a larger fuel tank and a bigger quantum drive will be a better option. Also, in the current alpha, it is a bit dull being in one ship, because if you're not the pilot, missile operator or turret gunner, it's really boring, and if you're not in combat, then only the pilot is doing something. As they begin to flesh out more of the other onboard roles, there will be more to do on board to pass the time, and so you may feel a bit more encouraged to all be in one ship rather than dotted across multiple. Next question is, what are the plans to differentiate shield types? Now, they have the base tunings and grades right now, and where they're lined up, and when they tackle the combat speeds, they will also be taking a look at what determines a military component versus industrial versus stealth and civilian and so on. Be that one could be stronger but produces more heat, maybe it's weaker but has a longer lifespan or a smaller signature and so on. They will be going through all components and allocating these characteristics and trade-offs more thoroughly, but they want these items and components to be more important. And when these components become physicalized, the physical location of these components may also affect the choice of what you choose for that ship. So for example, a specific component might not be that well protected, so you might want a stronger component for that location, but trading off something else. So they really want component choice to be very important, especially from mission to mission, depending on what you're doing, where you're going, what you might be coming up against, better protection against distortion versus physical damage and so on. Also missing from the verse right now are the shield emitters, and the idea being a shield generator will generate the shields and then distribute the shielding to the emitters, which are found at certain locations around the ship. And these are physical items on the ship that then project the shield facing and can also be damaged, replaced, and so on. There may be ships with multiple emitters per face, so you can't just destroy one emitter and then the whole face of that shield goes down. And this also means you could have two light fighters with the same shield generator, but if their emitter setup is different, then it will give a different experience. So there is going to be a lot of changes with shields, a lot more to come from what we have now, but I do love hearing about this depth. Next question, is there any news regarding spawning vehicles like snubs or ground vehicles inside other vehicles before we request them? And they say the devs working on this were reprioritized to other things, but with persistent entity streaming coming in 3.18, when you manually load vehicles into other vehicles, they will consistently remain there between sessions. But in order to get to the point where you can just spawn a ship with a vehicle inside, they will need to hook this up to either the ASOP terminal or the Mobiglass app, and then have it so it's player facing before we go and request the ship. Now, the next question is, what are the plans for ballistic ammo capacity? So, it is still being balanced, but this was always the intention to have limited ballistic ammo, with the idea being it is very powerful, even more so when physical damage comes online, but also very limited because of that, compared to energy weapons which are not as powerful, but can replenish themselves. Now, once the combat speeds are lowered, it'll be easier to stay on target and your rounds will become more useful, allowing players to use less and hit more rather than burning through your rounds in seconds. The lack of ability to restock is also pretty prominent right now, and that's something that they can look at. Reloading is something they do want players to do in some fashion, even if it is in the field, EVAing with a ammo box and then replacing that. But limited ballistic ammo is a core design element for a reason. It is also important to note there will be many more damage types coming along, like plasma, incendiary, disarray, each doing varied damage, plus different situations call for different loadouts. If you are out for an extended period of time where you will have no support or capabilities of reloading, then you will want to take energy, versus maybe launching a fighter from a larger ship with the option to go back and land and then rearm whenever it needs. So each mission, each job, each role of each fighter will come into play, and choosing the right option for the right job is going to be much more important going forwards. But of course, it is still being balanced. Next question, how will escape pods be launched? So, when physical damage and components come online, ships will no longer just instantly explode, they will become disabled instead in the various ways possible, all based on what components are damaged, and this will mean that you will have time to make it to an escape pod if you need to. So there will be a grace period to decide whether you need to get off the ship or not, but depending on what damage you have taken, you may only have a few seconds and need to get to an escape pod as soon as possible, or you may have all the time in the world and you can then organise an evacuation and a rescue, or perhaps start working and repairing and fixing your ship back up, and of course everything in between all that. Next question, we are currently able to hover statically upside down while planetside or in atmosphere. How will this change? So, over time, ships will become more like real aircraft. Of course, each planet and moon is different in terms of gravity and aerodynamics, plus each ship as well. Some are more aerodynamic than others. But the plan is to have controllable surfaces like flaps and ailerons, which will move the flight of ships in atmosphere from being almost purely thruster-based to full-on aerodynamics. Now, thruster values will also be getting addressed with main, retro maneuvering, and VTOLs, all behaving more as you would expect them to. So, for example, a ship with VTOLs will be able to hover for much longer periods of time compared to a non-VTOL ship, especially when it comes to things like heat. So they want things like thrusters and components overheating, causing damage, which means in the future, ships won't just be able to literally, while you're on the ground, point their nose at you and just start shooting. They will need to make strafing runs, making it more challenging for them. Next question, when will ships or vehicles get better or more useful external lights? Now, in regards to mining turrets, they are actively fixing this, and mining turrets like on the Mole will get their own lights independent of the main ship to help you see what you're doing, which they are actually currently applying to the Reclaimer turret for the hull scraping system. So we should see that hopefully in 3.18, where if you're in the hull scraping turret of the Reclaimer, you can put your own little light on and see what you're doing closer than what the pilot could. But the issue with the lights being dull is more of an art issue, as the gameplay teams do want lights to be brighter and actually useful, but the art team don't want it, as it basically washes out everything and it makes the whole visuals look horrendous. So hopefully they'll be able to find a way to alleviate this whiteout problem, but it sounds like they want to bring both options of having a toggle between low and high beam. So you could, if you're traveling fast, you could put high beam on. Won't look as nice, but you will be able to see further ahead. And then if you're moving a bit slower or staying stationary, you can put your low beams on. Everything will look nice, but you just won't have as much visibility. And yes, night vision will one day come along. That is a whole different thing. Next question, are there plans to reintroduce cannons into dogfighting? So you can actually use cannons now with dogfighting if you are accurate enough, but cannons are more tuned and intended to tackle larger ships, whereas Gatlings and so forth and repeaters are more for dogfighting. It's more about providing reasons to choose your loadout, and again, still learning and balancing with tweaking the weapon types and so on, but if you're good enough, you can use cannons. Next question, why does every ship outside the Gladius and Arrow get nerfed? Now, I will say all ships, regardless of what they are and what their roles are for, will continue to be tweaked, tuned and balanced, which if you are playing the alpha currently and assuming everything is final in the alpha, then of course you will also assume that ships are being nerfed or made OP. But as CIG continue to build the game and continue to implement new systems and mechanics like the physical damage system, flight maneuvering abilities, combat speed reductions, then the strengths and weaknesses are always going to fluctuate until they get to the point where they say, we're done. All ships will eventually perform in the role that they are planned for, but also most ships will feel different to each other, and over time we will probably find that we may have wanted to use this ship, but it might not suit our preferred style or skill set, and so either practicing more with that particular ship to get better with it, or choosing a different ship to suit your needs and your abilities could be a better option. But yeah, they're not specifically nerfing or making things OP, they're just trying to tune everything to the best they can without these systems, and as these systems come in, it'll continue to get tuned and we will see these fluctuate from ship to ship throughout the alpha. Next question, what about racing support? Now, they say this is more of an Arena Commander team thing, and they are looking into more racing specific things, which they will let us know about personally. The lowering of combat speeds will not remove racing from Star Citizen, which is all they kind of said about this question, but I will also point out myself that CIG do want to support a full-on racing career mode with cups like the Murray Cup and so on, and I guess it's just a low priority right now. But seeing the Snake Pick track get some support is great. Personally, I am fully expecting official racing leagues of varying difficulties and working your way up to the big leagues if you're good enough, like the Murray Cup, which is an actual race that happens in the verse. It is not just an Arena Commander game mode. So I do suspect when racing becomes a priority again, we will see more leagues, more categories, more support for fan-made races like Atmo Esports, racing around Grim Hex and betting, plus support for ship flight, so making maybe a racing mode would be nice. And I personally do really want to take part in racing. I don't think I will be anywhere near as good enough to be in the top ranking leagues, but I am more than happy for just starting in like the Sunday Cup style, weekend races where we just go and earn a bit of cash, throw money in the pot and see how we get on. Next question, what can you tell us about the Aurora Store All box? Now, this will become possible with the Cargo Refactor, but they can't guarantee that it will be a thing with the initial Cargo Refactor release. But it will come, and I can't wait for this, giving the Aurora that awesome light mercantile role that I've kind of been dreaming about since I saw it in 2012. So very excited to see this come along. It is going to be such a quality of life update for the Aurora. Next question, will there be improvements to relocating the Mothership once you've launched via a snub, as the marker currently disappears? Now, it is something that they are aware of, and it's a bug that they will resolve, but this is more of a UI team issue, and the new star map and marker system will help with this and likely resolve this issue too. So you'll be able to either have a constant marker on the star map, or you can place a marker to then go back to or even share amongst your party. Next question, player facing ship modularity, question mark. Now it is still planned. The team working on it were reprioritized to Squadron 42, but we'll come back to it. They want both modularity and the bait variants for Star Citizen, so it is just a matter of resources and time. Will a ground refuel vehicle become a thing? And they say yes, they do want this, and it does make sense as ground vehicles will eventually use fuel, and so having a vehicle on the ground that can go around and replenish this fuel is going to be necessary. And I personally can't wait for this. I love the idea. Something I imagine often is the idea of living planetside in a little homestead that I've built with a nice big garage, tinkering away on my dragonflies, tuning them up for, say, the next local dragonfly race, trying to get the best performance as possible and having to refuel them after a run out. Cannot wait for that to become a reality. Next question, boats, question mark. And they would love to make boats, and they now have the tech to do so, and he does say, he won't say why, but it is a Squadron 42 related thing. If you remember back to one of my progress tracker videos, boat physics was actually on the progress tracker for Squadron, and as we thought, they would eventually bring this to the PU one day. It was just needed for Squadron to begin with, but they are now trying to deliver ships and vehicles alongside their appropriate gameplay. And right now there is no gameplay for boats. Once we have more water volumes and gameplay, then they will build them. Fishing would be very nice, please. I know TOBII wants fishing, so that would be great. But I'm very happy they are making boats, and likely separate submersibles as well. Of course, priority is space and spaceships and ground vehicles, but knowing one day you could build a homestead near a river or an ocean, buy a boat and go fishing or diving and exploring underwater. They did say in a sprint report on Inside Star Citizen maybe a year ago that they also want to create shipwrecks out in bodies of water to explore. So definitely something for the very distant future, nothing that we're going to see in the immediate future, but knowing it's coming is still exciting. Next question, what is the status of the RSI Polaris? Now they said it has had a hefty reconcept and grew a little bit. The hangar is now a standard metric size and can hold any small ship like standard fighters. Components got a buff and it now has a docking collar. And Jared did say that he will try to fit in a segment on the new Polaris at some point. So hopefully we get to see that soon. Question after that is to do with the 600i gold standard. What is happening? And they say it's also had a concept repass. Externally, very similar, but now with a docking collar. Internally, it has had a major rework, but it still has the same feeling, but it's got a much more sensible layout. Less up and down verticality navigation. The modular room is now at the rear rather than in the middle, and all that was at the rear, like the crew habitation and engineering, is now in the middle. And hopefully this is something that they can also do a little segment on at some point in the future. Now the next question is Retaliator gold standard question mark. It was happening and it's suddenly gone cold. This is now on hold as the team was reallocated for other things, unfortunately. It does have a docking collar on the side. It also has wider corridors to help AI navigate. But what is left to do is the cockpit dashboard needs updating to the new standards, and the exterior needs to grow a little to accommodate the wider interior. Question after this is to do with a Starfarer gold standard, and they are going to redo the interior. There were some reasons before, he says, why they couldn't get on with it, which they can't go into, probably Squadron 42 related, but they have the green light to get on with it now. The escape pod room behind the cockpit, the chin under the cockpit, and the cargo area will stay the same, but the rest of the ship will get a whole refresh, as it is not great, which I am very happy for, especially now that refueling is in the game. Really do want to own this ship. Bit pricey at the moment, so maybe it's something to earn with the org, but it was the very first large ship to come into the game of such size, so a lot has changed since then, and I'm very happy that it's getting a full refresh. Next question, what's the direction of the Aries ships? Now, it was again down to balance and where they wanted it to fit, and they had to then rebalance it to fit in the current alpha. They want the weapons to feel impactful, but they could not achieve that right now with the current weapon system, and once this is figured out, it will get balanced again. For ballistics, the Aries will certainly benefit from restocking. They also tested and trialed a lot of the stuff with Evo and PTU, and it was a case of just having to tune it to the current game, but it will change in the future. Next question, the constellations are getting old. Any changes to come with these? And they say when it goes through its gold standard pass, they will need to redetermine the new component locations. That will require a bit of an update. So they will do a pass on its interior, but it won't look wildly different to what it is now. But they also do want to do something about the cockpit struts. Now, I personally love the constellations. They are one of those ships that kind of are the epitome of Star Citizen, but it certainly needs a bit of a refresh because it looks just dated and odd. Anyway, next question. Why do some ships get prioritized over others? And there is no one answer here. It is a combination of resources available, the tech that is required, priorities like Squadron, gameplay that's available with the ship. So many factors that determine these priorities, and that is why we see them chop and change all the time. Final question is, what's the one ship you haven't added to Star Citizen which is on your list? And for John Crew, it is a big, round, alien-style UFO, almost like what we saw with Argo. If I can find the image, I'll show it, but I can't remember where it was seen. Or a humongous ground vehicle, like a multi-story ground vehicle. And for Richard, a big, silly racing ship with massive thrusters. Now, for me personally, I would love more kind of Winnebago, campervan-style ships or vehicles, where you can head off into a forest and do some camping. But with that said, the question goes out to all of you. What ships or vehicles would you like to see in Star Citizen? Do let me know in the comments below. Anyway, that was the Star Citizen Live from a few weeks ago that I missed, but really wanted to cover it due to the enormity of information that it held. During my streams, many of these questions come up, so it's always good to have either the latest answer for people, or at the very least a place to direct them to for more details. Ship gameplay is coming along well now with engineering and life support in the works, physical damage and components, plus as they continue to balance and tune and reduce the speeds, bring more meaning to choosing what component and weapon you want, plus encouraging more of a skill-based element to it. Star Citizen is going to become more like it has always wanted to be, but it's definitely going to take a bit of time to get there. But with that said, hope you enjoyed the video. As I say, if you do appreciate my content, please do consider subscribing. We are fast approaching the 50,000 mark, so I would appreciate it greatly. Also, come and hang out over at twitch.tv/supermacbrother. You are all more than welcome over there. We are just checking out the PTU for 3.17.2 at the moment, waiting for it to go live, testing some of the Zero to Hero stuff to see how viable it is or where the strengths and weaknesses are. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind, it does the channel a big favour, and tick that notification bell if you would like to be notified when my videos go live. Again, big thank you to my patrons and channel members. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.